Hey guys, check it out! I'm the god of thunder and lightning now! Don't worry. I promise to use this power in the most responsible way imaginable. Now, everybody watching this video, I ask that you go get 2 pieces of bread and a slice of cheese. And you're going to put that cheese in the center of your slices of bread. You're going to go outside and raise your cheese sandwiches to the sky. And then using my divine lightning powers, I will send the gift of grilled cheese sandwiches to everyone on the planet all at once. And as Thor as my witness, none of them will be burned! None of them will be burned, I say! Okay, that's an intro, but we gotta get moving, okay? Because we're talking about Elbaf today. You know, with everything happening right now in the series, and by the way, spoilers for the most recent chapters of One Piece, everything that's been happening, I think we are definitely going to Elbaf now. I was like 95% sure we were going to go to Elbaf before this, because it doesn't really seem like Oda to set something like that up way back at the beginning of the story. Like Little Garden, you gotta remember, that's when Elbaf was first mentioned. Usopp wants to go there, but it's not even all about Usopp anymore. I mean, a lot of stuff in this story circles back to Usopp, but there's way more stuff involved, and with Luffy's new abilities, we have to go to Elbaf now, 100%. I'm not saying it's going to be a very long arc, especially considering Wano is the longest in all of One Piece. A lot of people are comparing it maybe to more like something like Zou, where Zou was, you know, relatively a short arc, didn't even really have a main villain for like Luffy to fight. It was more of just a condensed arc that had a lot of like information given to the Straw Hats about the road poneglyphs. I want Elbaf to be a little bit more than that. I think Zou was like 20, 30 something chapters. I would like Elbaf to be at least 50, to have some sort of overall plot involving the giants and like an enemy Luffy has to face, you know, and a lot of more stuff involving Luffy's Gear 5th, and we can explore that. But before I get into that, we are going to be talking about Norse mythology. However, it's not going to be one of those videos where I spend 35 minutes talking about that and I don't address One Piece until the very end. I've noticed I do that a lot. I was like, oh, here's a video about One Piece in relation to Greek mythology or Egyptian mythology. And then I'll spend 40 minutes talking about mythology because I like that kind of stuff. And then at the end, I'll be like, wait a second, I forgot this was supposed to be a One Piece video. No. We are going to have to mention things involving Norse mythology because that might give us some hints and clues into what Oda has planned for Elbaf, but One Piece is going to be the focus. So before I even get into it, I have 2 channel recommendations for you, okay? The first one is a channel called Useful Charts, and I'll put it up here in the card, in the description below and everything. Useful Charts, it's a channel that has a lot of useful charts that you can actually purchase, and I have a few upstairs in my hallway. But it's a lot of stuff about mythology and history. And so there's a whole video, it's about 13 minutes long, that goes through the basic family tree of the Norse pantheon, okay? So like Othin and Freya and Thor and Loki and everybody are on there. So if you want more like detail into the Norse family tree of the gods and the giants and everything, go check that out. And the other channel, if you want to go even a little bit further into it, there's a channel called Jackson Crawford, no relation to me, we just happen to have the same last name. And he is actually a PhD. He's like a doctorate of Norse studies and like Norse literature and language, and he's written a lot of books about this, and he makes videos talking more into like the literary aspect of all this stuff. If you want to go even deeper into like how these words are pronounced and a lot more involving the mythology behind like the Prose Edda and the Poetic Edda, which are like the compilations of like where we get Norse mythology from, go check out his channel. Okay, so I'll leave those in the card and down in the description, but now let's get into some One Piece. Okay. First and foremost, let's talk about the reasons we're going to Elbaf after Wano, the most overt, obvious ones, okay? Well, first and foremost, we have Luffy turning into a damn giant, right? I mean, that's pretty much a punch in the face from Oda, at least that's the way I interpreted that. We are going to Elbaf next, okay? Luffy's always had the ability to expand parts of his body. I mean, even without the Gum Gum Fruit, he could technically do that, but what I'm talking about here, without sexual innuendos involved, is that back in Gear 3rd, he was able to inflate his body with his bones to make, you know, he got pistol, he got rifle, he got stamp, all that kind of jazz, right? And in Gear 4th as well, he was able to make, like, his giant fist, you know, King Kong gun, and then in the movie Stampede, we had King Kong gun and all that kind of stuff. But now in Gear 5th, there's no more pretense, there's no more, like, I need to blow into my bones to make my giant fist or whatever. Literally, Luffy can seemingly just turn into a giant at will well, just through the nature of his awakening and Gear 5th, okay? He, went up into the sky, turned into a giant, and just emerged. However Luffy sees himself, whatever form he wishes to take, with the complete control over his rubbery body, as well as the malleability, like the silly putty sort of aspect, he can just, balloon himself up to be a giant, okay? I imagine he could also take other forms if he wanted to, like if he could turn into a giant snake or something, he can kind of mold his body into whatever shape. His imagination is sort of the limit at this point, okay? So Luffy turned into a giant. So that was pretty overt that we're going to have the giant arc maybe next. But let's look a little bit more into the subtext of all this, okay? Luffy is, the bearer of the mythical Hito Hito no Mi model Nika, which of course is the sun deity in the One Piece world, all right? I flashback and remind you to Totland when we had the flashback involving Big Mom. So it's a flashback within a flashback where we got to see a little bit of Elbaf culture there. We got to see a village and we got to see the kind of stuff that they do and like what they worship and everything like that. We knew from Dory and Broggy they were already a warrior-based culture. And I believe Elbaf is the name of their island, but it's also the name of like their war deity. It's like they pray to he's like, I pray to Elbaf that battle will be in my favor. Well, I pray to Elbaf that the battle will be in my favor. I see. Well, whoever Elbaf shines up their glory upon the most will win this fight. So, that's how giants duel, and that's how they do a lot of, their battles and stuff like that. They praise Elbaf before a big fight, okay? So there's the war god Elbaf, or the warrior god Elbaf, but then there's also a sun deity, because the whole deal of the fast, the winter solstice fast that got Big Mom into her original hunger pang that wrecked the entire town and killed Lord Fallbeard in the process, that was all for, giving gratitude to the sun and worshiping the sun. Okay, so they fasted for 12 days or whatever, and they ate the semla at the beginning and then at the end, okay? So Luffy being a sun deity and the giants worshiping some form of sun deity, I don't really need to go into more detail than that. I've made some jokes about it, where Luffy's gonna go to Elbaf, go into Gear 5th, and the giants are just gonna, bow before him. I sort of talked about it, in a comedic sense, and it might be comedic. Oda could do it both ways. He could have a moment where it's Luffy turns into his Gear 5th, his awakening, and all the giants, see that, and it's like, oh my god, it's the Sun God! Here, visiting Elbaf! Oh, I am so honored. How you doing? My name's Bjorn! It might be something like that. It might be comedic, or it might be an actual serious moment of reverence where Luffy takes this form in front of the giants, and it's not funny. It's literally the giants begin to weep and cry because they are literally meeting their god, in front of them right there. And I'm sure the giants have a prophecy, very much like how Zunisha right now is talking about how, oh, Joy Boy has returned to this world. By the way, we're going to be getting back to Joy Boy here in a second. Joy Boy has returned. Although Zunisha mentions it's not like a reincarnation thing, it's just an idea that Luffy resembles and reminds Zunisha a lot of Joy Boy because they both had the same fruit, okay? So Zunisha, he's a giant elephant, so it's kind of hard to tell, but I imagine Zunisha is feeling very emotional and maybe weepy right now at the return, quotes, the return of Joy Boy, their former comrade. Now, take that from the perspective of a giant, though, that might have this whole religion built around a sun deity, and it might mention somewhere in the religion that, one day the sun god will return or descend upon the earth in some form. Or maybe not, one singular moment where the sun god descends, but maybe, the religion speaks about, avatars of the sun god. I bring this up because look at Mother Caramel. Mother Caramel had the power of the Soul fruit, so not the same fruit as Luffy. However, she, through that fruit, was able to take the raging fires of the town started by Big Mom and form them into a homie, which she called Pandora. And it was this really elaborate process where the fire began to coalesce and this bright light began to shone over Mother Caramel in the same vein that happened when she rescued the giants from the Marines. It was 40 years before she met Big Mom, right? So I think it's possible the giants, the reason they respected and loved Mother Caramel as much as they did and allowed her to live on the island and have the lamb's house and everything was because they might have actually viewed Mother Caramel as the avatar of the sun god. Not because she literally is, but because through her soul powers, you know, she was there at Marineford like, oh, you must stay your hand and not kill these giants. And then as soon as she said that, the sky parted and the sun shined down on her. Of course, that was because she had the power of the soul fruit, so she can kind of manipulate the weather a little bit, just like Big Mom can with Zeus, right? And then later, when she creates Pandora, you know, this was when the giants were at their lowest, and, you know, the whole city, the whole town was burning down, and Big Mom had just killed one of their national heroes and everything. But then Mother Caramel was the one to stop the fires and create literally Pandora, which looks like the sun, you know, like this little tiny sun. And so that's why the giants kind of like bowed before her and like, you know, you are our savior. You are the living manifestation of our sun god here. Now, we don't exactly get the name of the sun god they worship, okay? One thing you got to understand about human history, like from our world, is that there is a slew of different sun gods. Even the Egyptians, you know, had like different aspects of the sun. You know, they had a god where they worshipped the sun as a disc, Aten. They had a sun god like Ra, which is probably the most famous one, eventually got merged with Amun-Ra. And that's just Egypt, okay? So when it comes to Norse mythology, was there exactly a god of the sun or something, you know, comparable, okay? Well, yes, there was. There was Sol as like the sun god there, but there were a few other gods that might, like Oda might take reference to, might take, you know, combine them together to create like Oda's own version of the sun deity, you know, making Nika essentially. Maybe when the Straw Hats do go to Elbaf, they'll see like, you know, a mural or like a stone carving on the wall of like the sun god of the giants, and maybe it will resemble Luffy while in Gear 5th. It might be something like that. There's also Surt. Surt is the god of fire, so something there that might relate back to the sun god. Let's see, there's also Balder, Balder is the god, I think, of light. So that might be a resemblance there to Nika in some way. So you could sort of see Oda, like, he might take this directly and just be like, I'm just going to incorporate this god from Norse mythology into One Piece, or I'm going to take a bunch of different gods and mold them together and to kind of create my own character. Either way, it could work. So, okay then, we have Luffy turning into a giant and a sun god, whereas, by the way, Big Mom was just kind of mimicking the powers of the sun, you know, through the power of the soul fruit. Luffy has a mythical zone that is based on an actual sun deity. Whether this means Luffy is a sun deity now, like, is Luffy a demigod? Like, serious question, I don't know, and I guess nobody knows. Guess we'll just have to wait for Oda to explain it, but yeah, that's a debate, whether or not, like, Luffy has the literal powers of a god, which would make him a demigod, or it's not really so much that, it's just, it's a power based off of the sun god, so he's still human, and of course he still has limitations with his power, Gear 5th, he's not divine on that level, then again, he was about to throw a lightning bolt at Kaido in the last chapter, so I don't know. So we have Luffy turning into a sun god giant, but then we also have the boatloads of foreshadowing that Oda has provided. Like, we're going to Elbaf after Wano. I think it's pretty much guaranteed. Now, what would this arc be focused on? It would be a very interesting way to structure it, because after everything involving Wano, we are going to be in the endgame now. We are going into endgame One Piece, final saga territory after Wano, okay? So I think the normal, like, arc setup, like, structure that Oda uses, like, Straw Hats arrive at an island, they find out there's an enemy on the island, Luffy beats them up, and then they move on to the next island. I don't think that's going to work with Elbaf, just because this will be, if they do go to Elbaf right after Wano, that will be the kickoff, the starting arc of the final saga. So I think there will be enemies that Luffy will have to face, and he will have to learn how to use his Gear 5th better with that battle. But I think more importantly, I think Elbaf is going to be an arc that dives into how to describe this, pantheon maybe, or just the religions or the gods of One Piece, which is something that Oda references every now and then, but it's usually in the background. Somebody just shared this with me a couple days ago, because I mentioned I was doing doing a video where I talked about, like, when was the first time a sun god was really mentioned in One Piece, and it was actually, you know, Skypiea. So it was hundreds and hundreds of chapters ago. It was mentioned during Nolan's backstory that Kashigami, so the giant snake that was about to kill that woman that Nolan saved. Nolan decapitated Kashigami in the process. Kashigami was referred to as a god of the sun, but also a god of the forest, a god of the rain, and god of the earth. As all gods into one entity, which was this giant snake that the Shandians worshipped back in their Golden City, okay? That snake was the grandmother of Nola, which was the snake that Luffy befriends during Skypiea. And there was also the parent of Nola and the child of Kashigami that I think Kalgara killed when Nolan was trapped in the earth by that earthquake, okay? Which I love that, because that's basically like the Shandorians worshiping this god, this giant snake, and the giant snake shows up and is about to eat this woman like a human sacrifice in order to, like, bring them, like, maybe there was like a drought or something. There was like some, or like, no, I think there was a disease or something going on with the Shandorians. They summoned the god Kashigami to save them with a human sacrifice. So Nolan kills Kashigami, and then everyone's like, you killed our god! And then later on, like, I think that same day, Kalgara witnesses the child of Kashigami, and I think he just realizes, wait a second, these aren't gods, they're just giant snakes. And then he just kills the child, and it's like, whatever, and then Nolan and Kalgara, they become friends at that point, right? So there was a mention of a sun god back then, but it was never, like, the forefront of One Piece to where, like, the Straw Hats would actually sit down and a character would explain to them, like, here is our religion, here are the gods of the One Piece world, and stuff like that. Certainly does not seem like anything Luffy is interested in to begin with. Robin, of course, would probably know a lot about how religion and the mythology in the One Piece world works. I'm wondering exactly how Robin would respond if somebody mentioned the Sun God Nika to her. So Luffy has no idea that he has the power of the Sun God. He's still thinking he has the Gamu Gamu no Mi. He's naming his techniques Gamu Gamu no still, although he's having a hard time coming up with new technique names. Like that punch that, like, you know, caved in Kaido's face. He was like, Gamu Gamu no, I don't know what to call that. By the way, what should Luffy call that move? Let's talk about that in the comments down below. So Luffy doesn't know he has the power of Nika, all right? But Jinbei heard the name from Who's Who during their fight. So it would be interesting if after the Straw Hats leave Wano and they're on the Sunny and they're traveling, I wonder if it would be a moment where Jinbei goes up to Robin and talks about the sun god that Who's Who discussed and this story involving slaves and everything. Robin might actually know something about this sun deity. And it might be something like, you know, Robin knows a lot about actual history and, like, you know, anthropology, like the study of, like, the humans and history and stuff like that. She would know a little bit about mythology because those are so closely intertwined, but she might not be an expert or anything like that. That's maybe a little bit out of her focus on, like, archaeology and stuff. And also, you got to remember, there are so many diverse cultures in the One Piece world that a lot of them have been wiped out by the world government. So she might have heard the name before, you know, Sun God Nika, but she might not know more beyond that. You know, she might just be like, I hear it's a deity that's worshipped by slaves in some cultures. I might have found scriptures or poneglyphs that might have mentioned this god before, as well as some other gods, but I'm no expert. So that'll give us, like, that'll be like the first chapter of, like, you know, the in-between between Wano and Elbaf, setting it up like we need to go somewhere where we know a lot more about this. And so they end up going to Elbaf, where they meet, like, a giant priest or something like that, you know, a monk or somebody that's a member of the giant race on Elbaf that's just like, oh, you want to hear about our sun god, do you? Well, allow me to tell you the story. And I don't know, the Straw Hats walk into a giant cathedral, literally a giant cathedral. It's already a giant cathedral, but it's a cathedral that where giants go to worship, which they would most likely have on Elbaf. Keep in mind, we only saw one village on Elbaf. That was it. We got to see a panning shot of the island, which had a giant tree, which is obviously Yggdrasil, the world tree. But we only saw one village on Elbaf, and it seemed to be a relatively small village by giant standards, okay? It was mentioned that there is a castle, there is a prince, the prince is Loki, so therefore there would be a king. The king is most likely named Othin, okay? Loki probably has a brother named Thor. You know, this kind of stuff is probably going to be standard, all right? Othin's wife is probably going to be Freya. That's going to be a thing. Okay, so then maybe there's like a royal giant capital city with a huge castle, and maybe there's a giant cathedral in the giant city of giants, and the Straw Hats go into this huge building, and there's like a giant mural on the giant ceiling. Everything's giant. Everything's bigger in Texas. Everything's even bigger in Elbaf, okay? So maybe they're looking up at this giant mural on the ceiling, like Michelangelo's painting in like the cathedral or whatever, and he's looking up, and like it tells the story. It shows the Sun God Nika bringing happiness and joy to everybody on the planet, right? And maybe there's other deities. Like, this will be the arc where we find out about all the deities of the One Piece world. There's, of course, gods of the ocean. They were mentioned before. There's gods of rain. There's gods of the earth. There's gods of the sky and of the wind and all that kind of jazz. You know what I mean? Like, this is the arc we find out about that lore. And I would love that so damn much. Also remember, when Dory and Broggy were about to use their technique against the giant goldfish at Little Garden. So the Mary gets swallowed, and then Dory and Broggy stand on the edge of the beach, of the shore of Little Garden. Dory picks up his giant sword. Broggy picks up his giant axe. Axe? He picks up his giant ass! It's just like, all right, Dory. I'm gonna use my mighty ass to finish off this giant goldfish. Whatever. He picks up his axe, and then they combine their attacks, and their weapons are destroyed. But the little guardian goldfish, or whatever you want to say, is obliterated, and the Mary escapes. But one thing that they mention is that the only thing our weapons cannot pierce or cannot, like, damage is the great blood snake, or the great red snake covered in blood. Something like that. It changes depending on the translations, okay? So, right then and there, that's some lore that was mentioned way back in Little Garden, and if you think that was like one line of dialogue that Oda's probably forgotten and is not going to incorporate into Elbaf, you're sadly mistaken, because in Norse mythology, there is a great serpent, the Midgard serpent, Jormungandr. That, I guess I'm pronouncing right? I don't know. Jormungandr. That's a fun one. But it's a giant serpent that kind of, like, encircles the world, sort of like the edge of the world of Midgard, or, like, the human realm is this serpent that's, like, circling it and will, like, attack ships and stuff. Oh, by the way, also, so I mentioned those two channels earlier, but if you want, like, a manga version of Viking lore, I mean, Vinland Saga, I mean, it's pretty much the staple. There's really no one better than Vinland Saga. Makoto Yukimura is a master work with this. Okay, it is great. So to go check it out. All right. So, yeah, we have the giant serpent. We have a sun deity. We have Prince Loki, where there's probably a King Othin, you know. And I don't know exactly how Oda's going to spin them, because remember, we had Neptune, the god of the sea, at Fishman Island, and he was honestly like Neptune mixed with, like, Santa Claus, because he had the giant beard and he was a jolly kind of fellow, and even his laughter style was ho ho ho, you know. So Neptune was kind of like Santa Claus mixed with the god of the sea, Neptune, from Roman lore. So Oda might do something similar with Othin. I kind of want Othin to be, like, an actual badass. Like, I want him to have, like, the eye patch, giant sword, really cool armor, you know. He's like one of the most epic warriors in the entire world. He would be, because he would be the king of the damn giants, all right? And the giants are already a powerful warrior race. Big Mom mentioned that if she had the giants on her side, she would have gotten the One Piece by now. Now, whether or not that's an actual thing that would have happened, or whatever is, regardless, it doesn't matter. Giants are very mighty warriors. Othin would be the greatest warrior out of all of them, okay? How would this get involved with, like, Fallbeard and Mountain Beard? Because they were, like, elderly giants that kind of retired. You know, would the king be as powerful as them in their heyday? I imagine he would be. To be the king of the giants, which is already a warrior race, you would have to be pretty damn powerful, okay? And I still think Othin would be maybe a little bit older. He might be over the hill, but he's still, like, in fighting shape. Sort of like Neptune. Neptune is old. I think Neptune's like 70, but he was still able to pull out like the Ultra Mariner. He threw his back out in the process. So maybe Othin would be a little bit younger than that, but like in the same vein as like Rayleigh. Rayleigh is pushing 80 years old, and he's still able to contend with an admiral. I think Othin would be like in giant years. I think it's mentioned like Mountain Beard and Fallbeard were like 340 or something years old, and they were very, very old. They were about to like, they were so old that Big Mom was able to like one shot, Mountain Beard, no, Fallbeard, sorry. But in Othin's case, maybe he would be like in his 200s, which to like a human being might be around like their 60s or something like that, maybe. Yeah, something like that we can go with there. Okay. So, Luffy's a giant sun god. Norse deities might be like related to the One Piece gods. We find out about them there. Big Mom. Usopp. Okay. So that's more of like, honestly, that was like the main reason we got to go to Elbaf back at Little Garden so Usopp can meet the giants and learn what it means to be a brave warrior of the sea. That's kind of a side thing now, considering all this bigger stuff that's going on. But I remind you, Usopp did not really have a lot of crazy moments during this arc, during Wano. He definitely had his moments. He doesn't have, like, nothing going on with Usopp. We had the scene where, he fought against Ulti in page 1 and his nose got cracked again, but that was more for just comedy. We had the scene where he kind of pretended to have Conqueror's Hockey and all of the Big Mom Pirates, not the Big Mom Pirates, the Beast Pirates kind of backed down. And just like, you will bow before your ruler, God, Usopp. It's like, oh, no! And then Big Mom's Conqueror's Hockey fired off, and that's how he was able to kind of like pretend that, and like the lie went through. Yeah, so we have a lot of moments with them. We have the moment between Usopp and Kinemon and Okiku. So we had moments with him, but there wasn't like a big moment with Usopp in the same way there was a big moment with Zoro. There was a big moment with Sanji. And I think, honestly, that's because Oda is waiting. Oda knows Elbaf is next. We're going to have a huge, probably Usopp's his finest hour, his biggest moment in the entire story, which, might rival or surpass the moment at Water 7 or post-Water 7, post-Enies Lobby when, Usopp apologized and he gets back with the crew. Those are moments with Usopp that you stick in your mind that remember. But I'm telling you what, man, Elbaf, that's going to be the moment for Usopp. There's going to be something happening there. Maybe Usopp will be the one to take out the main villain. If there is a main villain, like an evil giant or something they have to defeat, Usopp might be the one to take out that final boss rather than Luffy. So, and that'll be like his moment where he like realizes like, I am a great warrior of the sea. And then you'll have the other giants that will be like, oh, silly human, you were always a great warrior of the sea. And maybe Yasopp went to Elbaf too at some point. There's also the theory that Shanks' territory is Elbaf, or like his home base is on Elbaf. And so maybe Usopp will learn a little bit more about his dad there. Because that really hasn't happened throughout One Piece really at all. All of the islands the Straw Hats have visited, all the people they've met, never really been a moment where Usopp's dad was brought up to Usopp. Yasopp was like, oh, I know Yasopp. He was here, a couple years ago. And Usopp's like, really? What was he like? I haven't seen him since I was a kid. You know what I mean? We haven't really had a lot of moments like that in One Piece. It might be because Oda's just waiting for Elbaf for all that stuff to happen, right? Finally, we have Joy Boy. All right, and where does Joy Boy factor into all this, okay? So Joy Boy was purportedly a giant because the giant straw hat that's in the dungeons of Marijois. However, looking at that giant straw hat is certainly big, but I don't know if it's, like, big enough to be, like, a giant's hat. You know what I mean? Because giants are, like, really big. Dory and Broggy were a little bit above average. I think they were, like, 20 meters tall. The shortest giant is only 12 meters tall. And that's when you start thinking about stuff in the One Piece world that Oda references in, like, SBSs and just, like, side things. Here's a realization I just had. Oda specifically mentioned that the shortest giant is 12 meters tall. I don't know if we've ever met a giant that's that short. We might have. But what if that shortest giant, 12 meters, that was Joy Boy? Maybe that was the reference. So Oda kind of referenced Joy Boy in that question. You think it's such a simple answer to a question like, oh, yeah, in order to be considered, because the question was, is Big Mom as big as a giant? And Oda was like, no, she's about 8 meters tall, which is tall, but you have to be 12 meters to be considered the shortest giant. we thought that was just a basic fact about like, oh, okay, we learned some lore about giants today. No, what if that was Oda saying like, oh, you have to be 12 meters tall, and I already have a plan on who that's going to be, and that was Joy Boy. Okay, because that giant hat, like I said, like somebody like of Big Mom's stature or a little bit taller than Big Mom. Remember, Big Mom is very rotund, so a giant might be more muscular or whatever. But anyway, that hat might fit like a 12-meter tall giant rather than like, you know, somebody like 20, 25 meters tall like Dory and Broggy were. You know what I mean? So I think that might be the case with Joy Boy there. Joy Boy might have been a 12-meter tall giant, and he was maybe a part of the giant race, and he ate the sun god fruit Nika, just like Luffy had, and then he became the sun deity. And I don't know if it was a situation, because this probably happened like back in the Void Century. I don't know if it's a situation where it's because of Joy Boy the sun god became a god in giant teachings and the giant's religion, or if it was a situation where the sun god already existed and, you know, Joy Boy ate the fruit. Allow me to phrase it another way. Because if the fruit is called the mythical zone model Nika, obviously the god would have existed before the devil fruit. But what I'm saying is maybe the god is so ancient, nobody really knew about it, and then so the giants didn't worship that specific sun god until Joy Boy ate the fruit, and then the giants worshiped that specific sun god. Might be a situation like that there. Oh my god. Where did the fruit reincarnate? That's another thing altogether. I was like, could the fruit have reincarnated on Elbaf? Because it was mentioned by the Gorosei, the fruit always eludes them. It always like escapes their grasp, so that implies that it always reincarnates somewhere where the world government cannot reach it. Elbaf, from what we understand, is not with, well, okay. They're allied with the world government in the sense that there are giants that definitely are members of the Marines, okay? So the relationship between Elbaf and Marineford has to at least be decent for giants to join the Marines, but that doesn't mean that, like, the world government has complete control over Elbaf in the same way that, like, other kingdoms of the world do. Remember, there were no giants present at Reverie. So if there's no giants present at Reverie, and remember what Saul said, Jaguar D. Saul said, you know, giants don't all come from Elbaf. There's other islands where giants originate from, and Saul even made a point to mention that he was one of those giants. So all the giants, I guess not all of them, because Oimo and Kashi were from Elbaf, and then they, you know, agreed to work for the world government to guard the gate. But it's not a thing where they're an allied nation of the world government in the same capacity that, like, Alabasta or Dressrosa is. It's just that, you know, if the giants want to leave Elbaf and join the Marines, you know, they can do that. It's not like they're isolationists the same way that Wano is. Like, the giants have to stay on Elbaf or they have to follow this code. He's like, no, if, like, Ronsei and LaCroix, who were both members of the Giant Squad, they might have been born and raised on Elbaf, or they could have been born and raised on another island, and they might have just decided, hey, I want to join the Marines, and then they join the Marines, right? So the relationship is not bad between Elbaf and the world government, but it's not like on super friendly terms, okay? So that would actually have made it maybe a good place for the sun god fruit to reincarnate, maybe in on one of the limbs of Yggdrasil. Maybe Yggdrasil, the world tree, is where devil fruits originated from. That's a pretty obvious theory just because it's a world tree and you have devil fruits. Yggdrasil, the world tree, by the way, sort of works as like the structure of the different realms in Norse mythology. We got Midgard, which is the human realm, Alfheim, the light elves, Asgard, the Aesir gods, Svartalfheim, the dark elves and the dwarves, Hell, which is the realm of the dead, Vanaheim, which is the realm of the Vanir gods. There's the Aesir and the Vanir. There are different types of gods. There's the giant realm, which is Jotunheim, Niflheim, which is the realm of ice, where the frost giants reside, and then there's Muspelheim, which is the primal realm of fire. Okay, so maybe the sun god is tied to that. Now, this might not be like actual realms or like parallel dimensions in One Piece. It might be a situation where like Yggdrasil, like different levels of the tree have different like towns or cities of Elbaf. Like the ground of Elbaf, like the land where like we saw with Big Mom and the different giants and stuff like that, like that she burned down the town and everything like that, that might have just been the ground or the lowest level of the Yggdrasil. That might have been Midgard. And then you could go up the tree and there might be like different clouds, like island clouds, so there's different levels and tiers to the tree, and it's like this is the land of Alfheim and Asgard. Asgard might be where the city is, the capital city with the castle where Othin and Loki reside at the top of Yggdrasil, and that's where, like, it's a sky island, okay? That makes sense. And then Midgard goes below, so the tree could go under the island, and that's where the realm of hell could be. Maybe that's like a prison where the giants, like, send, like, the worst criminals of their kind down into hell, which is under the tree. And it might be like a part of the tree, it might be inside of the tree, like the actual tree itself, like you can walk into the tree and there's like a cave network and there's like a town in there. Could be something like that. But I like to think at the top of Yggdrasil in One Piece, it's an island cloud in the white sea, and there's a giant castle in the clouds, which is where Othin and Loki and Thor and Freya all live. That, I think, would be perfect for the storytelling, and just Oda drawing that would be wonderful. It would be very, very magical, very fairy tale-esque, and I think that would work great. And then under it, there's another realm. And also, trees in the One Piece world, you have the treasure tree Adam, which, by the way, Yggdrasil might be the treasure tree Adam. I mean, that's probably the most obvious thing ever, because Eve is the tree that provides the sunlight for Fishman Island, and also sunlight for the Saboti Archipelago, and, like, the trees and everything like that, and the bubbles. That resin. And so Adam is the treasure tree, but we've never actually seen the tree. It was mentioned by Frankie, like, oh yeah, legend has it a long time ago there was an island with a war, and then after the war the only thing to survive was the treasure tree Adam. Treasure tree Adam might be Yggdrasil. The giants might call it Yggdrasil, but, like, Frankie might know it as Adam as soon as he sees it, right? Might be a situation like that. I'm just saying, we could have 3 trees, Eve, Adam, and Yggdrasil, or we could just have 2, Eve and Adam, keep the, Garden of Eden, reference there from the Bible, from the book of Genesis, and you still keep Yggdrasil there, like Oda's combining different religions and stuff like that, which is he is wont to do, from what we've seen throughout One Piece. Anyway, yeah, that's pretty much everything I just wanted to talk about here. Let me know down below what you think involving this. Like I said, it might not be a very long arc. I would be happy with it, but I think just because we're getting into the final saga, Elbaf would be a beautiful way to kick it off. And then after Elbaf, Straw Hats could go to the last island on the Grand Line, which is Lodestar, pointing toward the compass, which they did say they're going to do. Many people have, like, aren't they even just going to, like, skip over Lodestar and just go to Laugh-Tale now because they have the road poneglyphs? Maybe the last road poneglyph will be on Elbaf, whatever. I think it is kind of implied that they are going to keep following the path, like Inuarashi told Nami, like, just keep following the log and you'll be fine, and Nami kind of smiled. So I think they're going to continue their journey that way. They are still going to go to Lodestar. So the way that this could shake down is the Straw Hats go to Elbaf, then Lodestar, then Laugh-Tale, where the final arc takes place. Or there might be an arc after that, like maybe an epilogue arc or something. Considering One Piece has lasted so long, I could see there being like a 30-chapter epilogue arc, just to wrap up everything, you know what I mean? Anyway, thanks for watching the video, everybody. I don't have goat facts for you today. I was too busy researching Norse mythology again. Check out those 2 channels, Useful Charts and Jackson Crawford. Thanks for watching, everybody. This will be Tekking and Barry signing out. Now raise your grilled cheese sandwiches. It's time to make some lunch.